Good? All right. Eyes up here, guys. All right, today's Dev Talk is on app shortcuts. This was added in Android 9 last year. Not a lot of apps use it, but I'm going to try to get us to use it as well. What are app shortcuts? Shortcuts define an intent into the application. Most apps, like messaging apps, would have a shortcut to maybe the last message you opened or the last person you were contacting, or to open or to start a new message. Apps like Uber or Lyft usually have the shortcut to, quick link to drive home, to request a driver to your home or to your work. Let me see. I think Twitter has, a shortcut to quick fire a tweet. And shortcuts can do anything an intent can do. Usually, you can use it for deep linking or to go to some specific screen in your app. There's two types of shortcuts. There's static and dynamic shortcuts. Static shortcuts are defined statically in your app, in resources. You create an XML file, and you define that in your Android manifest. Dynamic shortcuts can be added programmatically at runtime in your application. Static shortcuts. To set up a static shortcut, you would define a shortcut in your XML, and you just add the metadata tag to the activity that has the intent filter main and the category launcher in your Android manifest. This is a quick snippet of how to set up the XML for a shortcut. You have a shortcut ID that is supposed to be unique for each shortcut. You say what is enabled, then the icon. It could be any type of drawable icon, vector, whatnot. There's also a short hint, and a short label and a long label. The long label is for when you long press on the icon, the text that shows up next to the shortcut icon, that's where the long label lives. And the short label is for when the user long clicks on the shortcut and pins it to their home screen. That's when the short label would show up. Usually you want to use the same labels because, for our app, we don't have an abbreviated version of labels you'd want to use. Say for search, there's no way to make that shorter. So it's perfectly fine to use the same text for both. Then you also define the intent. The action is view that just opens the activity. And you have the target package and target class. Target package is a little misleading because it's not the Java application package, but rather the application ID. So if you have, a debug build where your package ID is com.scotza.grow.debug, that shortcut won't work in your debug builds. So usually the way we get around that is in our Android manifest, we would define a manifest placeholder like application ID, but this doesn't work in resources only in the Android manifest. So you'd have to define multiple shortcuts, multiple static shortcuts if you want to launch an activity like that. Dynamic shortcuts. These are shortcuts you define them programmatically in your application. There's ways to get shortcuts: add, remove, update, and set. The limitation here is that you can't modify a static shortcut programmatically. They're immutable, and if you try to call any of these methods, say a remove or update shortcut, to update a static shortcut, it would cause an illegal state exception. Building shortcuts. You just have to reference a shortcut builder. You set a short label, long label, and a rank. The rank defines what order in the list the shortcut is going to be ranked. 0 being the lowest, and int max being the highest. Also the icon, you can use this icon object. I think it was introduced in Android 23. It provides a very simple way to wrap different ways to create an icon. You can define a drawable bitmap or a file or some content URI, and then you can call get drawable on that object. But right here, we can just pass the icon object to the shortcut builder. And then you also set the intent. This intent could be any type of like deep link, whatever you define, whatever deep linking strategy you're using in your app, you can use that and then use that in that intent data on the target activity. Say your deep linking activity or splash screen activity. You can get this intent data and you can just start that screen. Say if you're starting a search activity which doesn't like accept any parameters in onCreate, it doesn't have to do any parsing or any of that. You can just start the search activity. Also, yeah. And shortcuts typically have a round icon. And you can make it any size you want, but my preference is to round icons. And it's sort of how they, let me see if I can go back. Since the shortcut, like this dialog is presented as with rounded edges, you don't want to have like a square icon in this box here. So it's preferable to use a rounded icon. And there's a handy class called thumbnail utils that you can call to center, crop, and whatever drawable bitmap you have. Whatever bitmap you have. And the shortcut manager also provides a way for you to get the dimensions that's necessary to create that bitmap. Say you're on, it will change depending on the version of your application. Not version, but the phone that's user is using. Also, we have a rounded transformation on the image that creates the rounded edges on the bitmap. Some gotchas. Adding dynamic shortcuts will throw an illegal state exception if you call it too many times. The max amount of shortcuts you can have is 5. It seems like a really arbitrary number, but there's a method you can call get max activity shortcuts. Max activity per shortcuts. Max shortcuts per activity. And you'll get back that number and you can use that to, put a not try-clash, but an if statement to guard against calling add dynamic shortcuts too many times. Also, this method would crash if the shortcut is a static shortcut, i.e. if it's immutable. What is this? This is a excerpt from the Grow source code. The effect I was trying to get is that I wanted to be able to call add dynamic shortcuts whenever I want to without that if statement. So I pulled out this into a different class, shortcut utils, and I can just call this whenever I want. And what would happen is that every call would rank will pull the shortcut to the top of the list. And say if you have, 6 shortcuts, every time that shortcut with the same ID is called, it will be moved to the top of the list, and the last shortcut would be removed. The shortcut manager has a way to get existing shortcuts by calling get dynamic shortcuts. This object that is returned it usually loses the information that you pass to the builder. For example, here the bitmap is lost because when you created the shortcut, it passes all that byte array of the bitmap drawable to the system UI. It holds that memory now. And when you call get shortcut, you can't read from that memory. So when you get it back, you get back a null object. And if you try to set it or update the existing shortcut with that shortcut object, you would get this really horrible image. And if you do everything right, it'll look like this. Cool. Here you can see that you can long press on the application on the application icon, it will present the dialog for the shortcuts, and then you can long press on the shortcut to pull it out and pin it to the launcher. Pin shortcuts. Each pin shortcut is a copy, since it's a copy, if you try to update it, they're all update. There's no way to differentiate between different pin shortcuts. Once a user pins a shortcut, it's sort of out of your ability to, not update, but to remove that shortcut from the list. So say if the user, I don't know, backs up and resets their phone, that shortcut would still be on their launcher. And it'll stay there until the user, I don't know, until they uninstall your application or manually long press and remove it. Android O changes. In Android O now you can request that a shortcut be pinned on the user's home screen while in the application. And just build the shortcut and you pass the shortcut info, and you also could supply a callback to know when the user pins the shortcut. This way you can customize the actual title of the shortcut, customize the title of the shortcut by presenting the activity to customize it, maybe to change the icon or change the title or change the rank. Anything you can do from the builder. And this is an example of this running on the latest O build. Oh, why didn't that loop? That's all you have to do is call Shortcut Manager, request pin shortcut, and it will present this dialog. That's it. Questions? The question is, in the, Jesus Christ. The question is, if you define the package name inside of a string resource and then you have that string resource in different build types, would you be able to just reference it here in the shortcuts XML? Yes. That is true, you can. I had not thought of that. Good call. Any other questions? Anyone? Thank you.